Let's face it, video game challenge runs are fun to watch. The truth is that a lot of them are fun to play. It's the main reason why challenge channels, like DougDoug, have gathered an audience on YouTube and Twitch, both for their unique challenges and witty banter. When it comes to doing your first one, sometimes it feels a bit daunting to figure out what to do and how to beat it. For my first one, I decided I wanted to try and play through Pokemon Violet again, but only using a single starter, similar to my first run of Pokemon Platinum as a kid. However, now that I had access to the Sinnoh starters through the DLC, I had a question I wanted to answer. Is it possible to beat the main game by only using Infernape? It has a pretty big move pool with some fairly decent options among them, so what if it's possible to go through the story without using any Pokemon other than it? The answer is kind of straightforward, but it's pretty interesting to see what I had to do to get there. Before we get started, I'd like to go over my rule set. I am allowed to use the starter Fuecoco in combat until I can trade, but after that, I need to box it. I can use items in combat, but I must get them in Violet, not the Scarlet version that I trade the Chimchar eggs over from. If I wipe out, I can retry the current challenge, since this does not count as a Nuzlocke. I am mainly going to rely on my first Chimchar with a physical build, but I am permitted to switch out or use the other Chimchars in a bind for the double battles. I am allowed to use Terastallization, but I am not allowed to change the type off of Fire, and only the main Chimchar can use it. Last but not least, I can only intentionally EV train my main Chimchar, not the two backups. Now with that out of the way, let's dive into how I got through Pokemon Violet using only the Chimchar line. So, some of you might think that this starts immediately with a new copy of Pokemon Violet, and I need to either hack or mod in the Chimchar that I need, right? Not really. You see, it's entirely possible to do a run like this on the official hardware for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. In order to perform a legitimate run of this challenge without manipulating any of the data of the game itself, we need 2 cartridges of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, along with 2 Nintendo Switch systems. A few days before my first stream, I began some preparations for the run. In my file of Pokemon Scarlet on my main Switch, I created a batch of Chimchar eggs, all thanks to the Teal Mask DLC expanded decks and gift Sinnoh starter egg in Kitakami. To get the best chances of facing off against the later boss fights in the game, I needed to either EV train or IV train my Pokemon. It is completely possible that you do neither, but for Infernape to sweep through without dying too many times, we'll need close to perfect IVs and nearly perfect EV training. To make that a lot easier on myself, I wanted a Chimchar starting out with a speed-raising nature, if I can. I found one with best in both speed and physical attack, which works with my plan going forward. After that, I reloaded my save to a point before the eggs were hatched, moved the egg with the selected nature and stats into another box, and grabbed 2 extra for the backup Pokemon used in the challenge, randomly selected from the remaining eggs. And I was now ready for the challenge run. Fun fact, while I was recording footage for hatching said eggs in Kitakami, I wound up hatching this bad boy. No! That's not real! I hatched this before! This shouldn't be shiny! This should not be shiny! This is kind of insane, and we'll need some more testing, but when I originally hatched this egg before resetting the save file, this Chimchar was not shiny. The only changes to me hatching this Pokemon was that I hatched this in Kitakami, the Teal Mask DLC area, instead of Paldea's Porto Marinata, where I had hatched it during the preparation phase. Alternatively, the stats didn't change from when I hatched any of the Chimchars for the run. My thought process is either that the 2 areas have different coding for what the trainer's shiny value is, or that the game decides whether or not it is shiny based on when it is hatched, not when the egg is created. I haven't tested it enough yet, so we can't know what it is exactly. When I started streaming, I picked Fuecoco as my starter, beat the first fight with Nemona, and caught a Lechonk and a Tarantula before the windmill. I then slid down a cliff to feed my mom's sandwich to a malnourished Miraidon. I followed Miraidon into and out of the nearby cave, defeated Arven Squovet, and then caught a Pawmi. Upon reaching Los Pagos Pokemon Center, I was finally able to trade, so I transferred over 3 Chimchar eggs by trading the 3 caught Pokemon. Hatching the eggs in this game would ensure that my challenge file's trainer ID would be the one on all of the Chimchars, so I wouldn't either gain an unfair advantage in experience growth, or run the risk of over-leveling past the cap that my Pokemon would listen to me. Really and truthfully, we could only use one Chimchar for this run offensively. However, there are a few minor issues in our path. Namely, the Team Star base raids and the Ghost Gym. Team Star base raids require that you have a total of 3 Pokemon in your team, so I would need members that wouldn't heavily impact the run one way or the other. Additionally, the Ghost Gym, Trial, and Gym Battle both require that you have 2 Pokemon in your party, so we'll need a secondary party member. The first one to hatch, I named Sun Kung Fu, as a kind of a reference to Sun Wukong, the inspiration for Infernape, and the types of moves we'd be using for this run. I almost immediately began training up Sun Kung Fu to raise his speed EVs and maximize his speed potential. After reaching level 9, I deposited my original starter Fuecoco, then headed up to the Pokemon Center just out of Mesagoza. Upon reaching the Pokemon Center, the remaining 2 eggs finally hatched. The second Chimchar I decided to name Kakarot after seeing a friend of mine in the chat suggested it. The third one, however, was a female Chimchar. Pleasantly surprised by this, I named her Videl after the character from Dragon Ball. Just after that, Nemona challenged me to the second rival battle. Fortunately, the Sprigatito was weak to Ember, so it went down rather fast. Unfortunately, her terastallized Palmy was too much for Sun Kung Fu. As a result, I wiped, but the game carried onward after that point. Overwhelmed by your defeat. I have not lost this fight before. Oh, it continues the story! I was genuinely surprised by this. Usually in Pokemon games, you only get the first battle's grace period, which means you can continue the story even if you fail the first rival battle, or the first actual battle in others. But every single one after that would send you back to the Pokemon Center. Apparently, the developers thought about the rivals fights being almost out of nowhere, so they planned for you to face down against her as a friendly rivalry. Sure, you still get the EXP if you win, and losing to her means she takes some money, but the story doesn't stop here because the developers wanted you to enjoy the world, and preparing to face a surprise battle like this would have taken away from the journey as a whole. Upon entering Mesagoza, I rushed off to the west side of the city and bought my first important item for this run, a Power Anklet. This, along with a Power Bracer, can be found in the Delibird present shop here in the main city, meaning as long as you have 10,000 LP or Pokédollars, you can use one of these to speed up your EV training in the game. I equipped the Power Anklet to Sun Kung Fu, and then continued the climb up to the Academy, and received the 3 types of objectives in the Path of Legends, Starfall Street, and Victory Road storylines. After the time skip, I can begin the challenge proper, grinding and training up the Chimchar. Sun Kung Fu took out Rookies, Fletchlings, and Palmies on the way to the Pokemon Center to the east of Mesagoza. Then, when I healed him up there, I flew back to Mesagoza and headed out the west gate to Cortondo. Sun Kung Fu evolved into Monferno just before I took on the gym, boosting his base stats. Now that he had the added firepower paired with Terra Fire boosting Ember, he was strong enough to nearly one-shot everything in the gym leader's team. Badge 1 down, a whole lot more to go. I then sold a few items I had picked up, flew back to Mesagoza to purchase the Power Bracer. After swapping the Power Bracer onto Sun Kung Fu, I then began raising the attack stat for our Monferno. By the time I faced off against the Titan Clough, Sun Kung Fu was powerful enough to beat him in 3 turns on Phase 1, then beat him with Arven's help for Phase 2, all without being too high leveled over the Clough. Arven then made us a killer sandwich and gave us the first Titan badge, our second one total. I then used the rest of Session 1 to train up Monferno to max out the attack and speed stats, then make my way to Artisan, the next objective. Arceus' gym was our first of 2 hide-and-seek games. We just had to find 10 Sunflora in Artisan. Technically, there were more than 10, as seen in this clip here, but we just need to rush around the town and talk to them. It's really easy to find them on Koraidon and Miraidon, so just stay on them the whole time. Arceus himself is a pushover, considering that Monferno resists grass moves and burns all his Pokemon to a crisp. Our badge count is now at 3. For our 4th badge, I backtracked over to Cortondo and beat some trainers around it to get the TM for Aerial Ace. This isn't the only item I can get like this, but I should only need 3 of these items for the run in question. Once that was finished, I headed to the Pokemon Center between the next 2 objectives, the Titan Bombardier and the Dark Team Starbase. I technically got the first call about the Titan Bombardier, but I chose to ignore it for now. Team Star's Dark Squad was my next objective. The grunt at the gate didn't give me too much trouble, so I expected the next little segment to work out fine. That being said, the reason I had 3 Monfernos for this challenge became abundantly clear. I could not go into a Team Star base and raid it with less than 3 Pokemon in my team. Seeing as this was the Dark Squad, and the only one that wasn't weak to my attack type was Sableye, the raid went off without a hitch. only taking about 2 minutes to complete. Then Yakomo comes out, and he's kind of a pushover, especially for Monferno. His Pawniard is quad weak to our Mach Punch, so all we need to worry about was the Dark Starmobile, which, after some X items and healing spam, we were able to take down in a few hits. As the victor in our bout, Yakomo awarded me with his Team Star badge, our 4th one total. It was important that I defeated the Team Star base before Bombardier because of a TM that is unlocked, Rock Tomb. This 60 power rock type move lets me 2-shot the first phase of Bombardier and take minimal damage as a result. That being said, I needed cloth sticks in order to make it, but one run in with a cloth back near the first Titan gave me all the sticks I needed. Now that I had Rock Tomb, I traveled up the mountain to face off with the Bombardier Titan. Phase 1, I completely forgot to terrestrialize into fire, to only take neutral damage from Pluck. That being said, Rock Tomb was a 2-shot, so I managed to get the second phase started without too much trouble. Phase 2, however, does not let you breathe from Phase 1, unlike every other Titan fight, so I couldn't heal up from my earlier mistake. One Rock Tomb was all I could get out before being hit too hard by Pluck and going down. I lost my use of terrestrialization at this point, but Arven's Knackley managed to get 2 smackdown hits, and he ended the fight before too long. That's the second badge from Arven, our 5th one total, so he opened up about why he's seeking out these mystical herbs in the first place. Alternatively, Rhydon can now swim, so our movement options open up in a whole new direction. Next up was Levincia, and even though Team Star's Fire Squad has a barrier between Artisan and Levincia along the main road, I could easily just jump over the cliff next to it, land on the grassy field below, and rush out towards Levincia. Being able to swim makes it rather easy to avoid this confrontation, but you don't need it to reach Levincia at all. Levincia itself hosted Gym 3, but Nemona was down to battle us first. Forgot to check if you could say no to skip this fight, but I didn't have any trouble with her at all. Mach Punch on Rockruff, Terrafire Flame Wheel the other 2 combatants. Now with her satiated in combat, we can go and tackle the gym. Iono's Gym in Levincia had me play the second game of Hide and Seek, though this time it played out more like Where's Waldo, where I had to spot Director Clavel around town from a few security cameras. Both trainers I had to face went down to the single Flame Wheel to each Pokemon, so it wasn't too tough of a challenge for me. At this point though, the live stream feed from OBS hiccuped on my way back to the Pokemon Center to heal up before the fight with the Iono. For those who wondered why part 2 of the stream is split into 2 parts, that's why. Don't worry, it came back up without anything important being lost in the process. Iona's fight was tougher than the other 2 gym leaders up to that point. First, I Rock Tombed the Watch Roll, knocking it out. Then came out the Belly Bolt. This thing knows Water Gun and has the ability Electromorphosis, meaning it can strengthen Spark when it gets hit. I was able to mitigate the damage it dealt by using an X Special Defense and an X Defense, raising both stats by 2 stages. Electromorphosis Spark still gave me a scare beforehand, but Terrafire Flame Wheel managed to 3-shot it. Luxio came down next, but it was a 2-shot from Flame Wheel. And then the Mismagius hit the field. This thing, with the help of its Levitate ability, has no weaknesses, and it knows Confuse Ray, which is usually a problem. Luckily, Sun Kung Fu knew Taunt, which prevented it from using Confuse Ray on turn 1. 3 Flame Wheels knocked it out before it could use Confuse Ray again after shaking off the Taunt. Iono's Gym was down, giving me badge number 6. Now it was time to take on Team Star's Fire Crew. Fortunately, there's a Pokemon Center just south of it, so I flew there, then began the raid. The guard's Houndour goes down in 1 shot thanks to Mach Punch, and the grunts in the raid are mostly easy to beat as long as I took care to heal whenever Videl took damage from the Nummels nearby. Mela herself was fairly easy to deal with. Torkoal was using Clear Smog, so I put off setting up and just 4-shot it, having to heal in the middle of it. The Fire Starmobile has Speed Boost, so I began wailing on it with Rock Tomb. I had to heal a couple of times, but largely the Speed Boost ability does nothing to impact the fight for me. 6 Rock Tombs and 1 Mach Punch later brought Mela's tricked out Revavroom to its knees. With Mela now twisting my wrist, I had my grasp on badge number 7. The lurking Steel Titan Orthworm was rather easily dispatched thanks to a 2-turn Phase 1 by Terrafire Flame Wheel, then Phase 2 taking 3 turns with the help of a Screech from Arven's Toadschool. Arven's 3rd Herba Mystica in hand, I now received badge number 8 for my efforts. As a bonus, Miraidon now has the boosted jump, so I can now reach a few more places thanks to it. I then did some prep work for a battle coming up. Hardest boss for the run was next, and I wanted to be ready for it. I headed north from the Pokemon Center outside the Dark Team Starbase and entered Cascarafa. which had a Pokemon League rep who would award me the TM for Earthquake after defeating 5 trainers in the desert. I caught a glimpse of the next Titan, but kept my distance, as facing off against it was not going to be feasible just yet. I finally found 5 trainers and got my TM. It was then that I found out a painful truth. While Infernape could learn the move Earthquake, Inferno could not. What? Oh, I have to evolve to learn Earthquake? Ooh. No! Come on! This would mean I would have to wait for level 36 to evolve it. However, I would not be able to do this before the next Team Star base, the Poison type base, which would give me the necessary TM craft recipes to tackle the next gym, and most of the game remaining beyond that point. Not only that, but not counting the Elite Four in Area 0, this is the last objective where every required fight would be weak to Earthquake. I figured I could still continue onward, but I need to be careful to do so relatively unscathed. Fortunately, upon reaching Tag Tree Thicket, which I affectionately refer to as Lag Tree Thicket, I began leveling just enough to reach level 33, almost level 34. During that run, I found the TMs for Toxic Spikes, which could have been fun in another type of run, but also Shadow Claw right beside the Terra Grafii. What? That's where you find it? I was thinking I was gonna have to make that! I didn't know that this was here. Every time that I looked up where this TM was, I was under the impression that I had to craft it myself, or find a random place in one of the provinces. Trying to find something in those areas is downright rough to do because of how expansive the areas are, along with the lack of a natural barrier between provinces and areas. Naturally, I taught this to Sun Kung Fu for later, but began my battle with Team Star nearly immediately afterward. The gate battle was easy enough, and the grunt matches in the raid were as well, but Atticus' Starmobile wrecked my team on the first go-around. I had to try it again, which is when I learned that the game saves the Team Star bases in 3 stages: Gatekeeper, the base raid, and the boss battle, which if you fail one, you can always pick right back up where you left off at the beginning of whatever phase you failed. Before my next attempt, I ran over to Levincia and bought a Covert Cloak, along with some much needed X items. Covert Cloak would help with preventing me from getting poisoned by moves like Gunk Shot. But I forgot to account for one Pokemon, Skuntank. Atticus starts with a Skuntank that knows Sucker Punch, Toxic, and Venoshock. Sucker Punch is a priority move that hits opponents that are attacking but fails if the opponent doesn't choose an attacking move. Toxic is a status move that badly poisons, meaning that I take 1/16 damage each turn, boosted by another 1/16 every single turn. Venoshock deals massive damage while the opponent is poisoned. The worst part is that Toxic ignores my Covert Cloak, so if I played it out wrong, the Skuntank could poison me, then Venoshock my Monferno for massive damage. I failed to realize this until attempt 2 when Skuntank took out Sun Kung Fu before I could set up. It was then that I remembered that Sun Kung Fu still had Taunt. I reloaded the save to the beginning of that attempt and tried it again. I taunted Skuntank on turn 1, buffed up my stats on turns that I wasn't hurting too badly, then healed when I needed to. Every third turn sequentially after the first one, so turns 1, 4, 7, and so on, I would taunt and keep Skuntank from using Toxic. Eventually I was at +4 on attack, speed, defense, and special defense. The only thing left was to Terrafire Flame Wheel everything on the field, taking down all 3 Pokemon in 1 hit, with the Starmobile itself going down in 3 hits. Apparently Atticus is a fan of item spam, bowing as he handed me badge number 9. Atticus being taken down here unlocks a lot of great TM recipes for later on in the game, but the most important ones are these: Thunder Punch, U-Turn, Poison Jab, Zen Headbutt, and the same Shadow Claw TM that I picked up in Tag Tree Thicket. The most pressing one would be Thunder Punch, since the next badge would be from the Water Gym. So when my next stream started back up, I had notes ready for the moves I'd be trying to find the items for. I flew back to Lost Plateaus near home, used some well-timed, precise jumps to get up the mountain separating my house and the school, and defeated 3 Toxels up here to get their sparks. Funnily enough, on my way there, I picked up the TM for Grass Knot, which I thought would come in handy later. I then flew back to Cascarafa and headed north out of the desert into this rocky alcove and defeated 3 Metatites for their sweat. I then flew back to Cascarafa and crafted a Thunder Punch TM. I then headed to the gym where we were given a wallet to deliver to the gym leader, which if this wallet was a Veluza wallet, it would make so much more sense for this character. Regardless, I rushed after him to Porto Maranata, gave him a slightly Nordic accent.
Barton Veluza! My wallet! Say what now? My lobby staffer sent you out here to bring it to me.
And won an auction there to get some high quality seaweed. We then flew back to the gym and swept through him using Thunder Punch. Badge number 10, right there. Our next objective was the normal type gym in Medali. By this point, I hadn't been able to evolve yet, but that didn't matter too much. I headed north from the Pokemon Center outside of Porto Maranata and used the pathway near Castle Royal Lake. Now, playing this game again, along with being a fan of Tom Fawkes, I already knew the answer to what to order in Medali's restaurant.
Did I guess it?
Still, I hadn't evolved yet, so to push that last little bit over level 36, I fought the 3 gym challengers hanging around the city. Son Kung Fu evolved into Infernape right there in the city, just in time to challenge Larry in the gym. Infernape was powerful enough that I could sweep through the whole opposition using close combat. Larry was happy to hand over the normal type gym badge for our 11th one total. Next up was the Ghost Gym on the mountain to the north, specifically Monte Nevera. I made a slight detour and found the TM for Swords Dance, which is kind of insane. There it is, Swords Dance! That's what I wanted to find. Swords Dance effectively is a replacement for my X attacks, taking a turn to bulk up my physical attack power by 2 stages. At the time, someone in the chat mentioned bulk up as an option since it boosts your attack and defense by 1 stage each. But for the time being, I filed away the information given, continued up to the gym. Someone in the chat wanted me to use a moist critical impression for MC Sledge, but I had no idea how to do that. Here's what I came up with.
Yo, trainer, you're the one performing the opening act today. The name's Moist Critical Sledge. This is the stage. I'm sorry!
I am not a fan of how this impression came out, so I'll keep the roleplay of that bit to a minimum. Regardless, this gym was all double battles, which meant that we'd be getting a bit of action from one of our other Monferno buddies. Kakarot happened to be the lucky one, evolving as we defeated Rhyme. But because Son Kung Fu already knew Shadow Claw, I had Kakarot focus on using Taunt and Torment, sometimes using his turn to heal up Son Kung Fu. Still, now that we had our 12th badge, I was feeling rather confident. The next objective I had planned to knock out was the Ground Titan, which turned out to be an Iron Treads from Area 0. With it being a Steel and Ground type, this was easy to punch through with close combat. Arven's 4th Herba Mystica was down, and I had my 13th badge. Material grinding time had come again, this time for the Thief TM. It didn't take long at all, and I thought it would be a good idea to teach this to Infernape instead of close combat for the next gym battle in Alfornada. That being said, the Nemona fight was first, so I knew that I would need to break out the close combat for that. Nemona was swept until Meowscarada came out, and walloped my -3 defense and special defense Son Kung Fu using Slash.
Oh, okay. Ow, son of a... Alright, let's hope that Kakarot can pick up the slack.
I sent out Kakarot and he finished it off with close combat, but not before tanking a Flower Trick himself like a champion. And thanks to the EXP across the team, Videl finally reached level 36, evolved, and learned close combat. I had intended to use her as a special attack combatant, but as evidenced by the use overall, that never happened. After that, I healed up the team and began the gym test. This test was basically Rhythm Heaven broken up by 2 battles against Psychic types. As it turns out, Thief's power was only 60. Shadow Claw, which I already knew was 70, making it the better option to use against Psychic types. For normal types like Indeedee or Girafarig, I had taught Terra Blast to Infernape instead of Flame Wheel. In these cases, Thief would be super effective, but if I could use Terra Blast as a Fire-type Terra, this would become an 80 power Fire-type move that then doubles its power to 160 instead of an effective 120. Technically with Terra Fire, this was better than using Shadow Claw as well, but I didn't factor that in until way later. As for the gym battle proper, I instantly used Terra Fire to remove Infernape's weakness to psychic attacks. Son Kung Fu then used Swords Dance twice to increase his attack to +4, tanking 2 Zen Headbutts from her Farigiraf, then used Fire Terra Blast to knock it out. Each of her other Pokemon went down to a single Shadow Claw after that. That makes for what I thought would have been the hardest gym, but honestly, it was our easiest battle yet, and our 14th badge total. Next up on the list was Grusha, the Ice-type gym leader on Glaciato Mountain. The gym test is a fun snow sled minigame that I love doing, even as a minigame after finishing the main story the first time. After that, I had a moment with Grusha about his past trauma, I think, and then began the battle. Honestly, this one is the easiest one in the run. We've got an arsenal of fighting and fire type moves, so we either punch through or burn through his ice types completely. Couldn't ask for an easier 15th badge. I then had a plan to get both the Poison Jab and Reversal TMs. Poison Jab was easy to do, just defeat enough Seviper to get the 3 materials from each species. Problem lies with Reversal. The only 2 locations I could see were in Casseroya Lake, but I searched all around it and couldn't see it before I ended the stream. Off stream, I checked on the other one, which was off in an area to the west of Levencia, but I couldn't see how to get up onto the ridge. However, by heading up to Zapapico, backwards jumping into this corner, rushing across the area, then gliding from this cliff to this mount, you can just barely make the jump. I managed to finally get Reversal and was almost ready to take on the next objective. Along with that, I defeated trainers around Porto Marinada. None of them were especially tough considering we came back for them, but the league rep outside of the town gave us a focus sash, which would help with a fight coming up. I also managed to defeat enough Seviper off-screen for the Poison Jab TM, but I took a bit more time to grab materials from Lokix, Dunsparce, Charcadet, and Axew. These extra materials came in handy for crafting the TMs for U-Turn, Zen Headbutt, Fire Punch, and Bulk Up. There's a little ledge that you can go up to get this little TM right here. Stealth Rock. I don't plan on using that, but that may come in handy at a later point. Back to the streams, I made the TMs I just mentioned, even though I already had a Poison Jab TM available. I then taught as many of these moves to Sun Kung Fu as I could, even teaching Earthquake to him. Then, I headed off to the Fairy type challenge, the Rekba Squad base. Nothing too bad for the gate fight or the raid itself, but Ortega was an interesting story. Sun Kung Fu knew Reversal, Poison Jab, Terra Blast, Swords Dance, and held a Focus Sash. Turn 1, Sun Kung Fu used Swords Dance, then wound up losing that same attack boost thanks to a charm from Azumarill. Turn 2, another Swords Dance, followed by a super effective Aqua Tail that my Focus Sash saved me from. Now that I was at +2 attack and at 1 HP left, I used Reversal on turn 3, knocking out the Azumarill. The rest of the foes went down in 1 hit thanks to Poison Jab, aside from the Starmobile, but I healed up Sun Kung Fu on the first turn it was out and used Poison Jab until it fell. Ortega's team went down without too much of a fight for a relatively blood-free 16th badge. Next up was the False Dragon Titan from Casseroya Lake, or Lag-A-Roya Lake, as I sometimes call it. I had taught Grass Knot to Sun Kung Fu thinking it would work, but it only ended up doing about 50% of its health in 1 hit. He instantly went down from 1 hit from Dondozo, so I revived him and tried it again. The second shot, phase 1 was completed. Phase 2 was a bit rougher, with our Grass Knot only doing about 2/5 of his health. 2 Aqua Tails later and Sun Kung Fu went down. Brought in Kakarot and used a revive on Sun Kung Fu, but the Greedent that Arven brought used Tail Whip twice followed by a takedown. With only a sliver of health left, one Mach Punch from Kakarot managed to finish the fight. The Tatsugiri that followed went down after a Swords Dance and 2 close combats, not necessarily in that order. And with that, Arven gave us the 17th badge. Next up on my list was the Calf Squad base in the mountains. Aerie was no joke for the first 2 times I faced off against her, and I figured she'd be hell to deal with this time as well. That being said, Sun Kung Fu had Bulk Up, Zen Headbutt, Terra Blast, and Close Combat, holding a Covert Cloak. Thanks to the Covert Cloak, Aerie's Toxicroak couldn't poison me with Poison Jab. Thanks to it only knowing physical moves, Bulk Up made it so that any hit it did against me did less and less damage each time. After buffing to +4, I healed Nier up to full with a Hyper Potion, then used Zen Headbutt to knock out the Toxicroak. Oh, come on, Infernape! That's 2 misses out of 3 uses! My record right now is a coin flip on 90% accurate moves. It's true. For something that's not 100% accurate, it's 50% accurate! Lucky for me, I managed to Zen Headbutt the Passimian and the Annihilate, then Close Combat the Lucario, and finally fire off 2 more Zen Headbutts on the Starmobile. 3, technically, due to the laws of accuracy, to end the fight. Aerie then hands us her Pride and Joy, her Fighting-type badge, and our 18th and final badge possible. Next, I had options. Meet up with Arven outside the lighthouse, tackle the Elite Four and Champion, or head up to the Academy in the evening and defeat Cassiopeia. I opted to start with Arven at the lighthouse, considering he was the lowest level trainer fight left outside of the league. He started with Greedent, which I managed to Terrastallize into Fire-type, and lived through 2 Earthquakes thanks to bulking up twice. I then used a move I had him relearn, Slack Off, which healed up about half of his HP. 1 more bulk up brought me to a +3 on both defense and attack, making my close combat knock out the Greedent immediately. After that, I just Terra Blasted the Toadstool and the Scroll Villain, while using close combat to take out the Gargantual, Cloyster, and Arven's Terrastallize my boss stuff. Now that Arven was defeated, we concluded our bouts with the Titan Pokemon in their entirety. Next was the Elite Four, but I began to struggle with Rika. Not to make it long and tedious, but I failed against her team of ground types 3 times before I figured out the strategy. Instead of bringing in Son Kung Fu first, I brought out Kakarot, who I taught Stealth Rock, one of the TMs I picked up. Stealth Rock goes down first, then Whiscash tries to attack, but misses. I then let Kakarot perform Mach Punch for chip damage before he goes down. I then bring in Son Kung Fu holding the Focus Sash, while knowing the moves Close Combat, Mach Punch, Earthquake, and Swords Dance. Because I knew that Son Kung Fu could survive 1 hit from Whiscash, I used Swords Dance. On the following turn, I threw out a Close Combat. Next was her Donphan, which also fails to Close Combat. Then out came Dugtrio, who knew Sucker Punch. If this thing got that move off when I tried to use Close Combat, my defenses were gone, and my monster wouldn't carry the attack buff I gave it. I used a Max Potion to get Son Kung Fu to full health in hopes that it would use Sucker Punch, which killed my most recent run. Unfortunately, Dugtrio went for Earthquake, which brought Son Kung Fu down to 1 HP and used up the Focus Sash. My next turn, I used Mach Punch, which was enough to KO this thing thanks to the attack buff and its frail defenses. Next was her Camera Up, but Earthquake was strong enough without buffs to blitz it. Finally, her Clodsire. This thing killed my runs twice, but on this attempt, I had enough of an attack boost to knock it out with 1 final Close Combat. With that, Rika was down. Next up was Poppy, and yes, I kept using a smoker voice for her.
It's so cool that you made it this far, but this is where you say bye-bye, mister. All my Pokemon are super tough.
Her team had Capparaja, which knew Stealth Rock. If I planned on getting a good enough shot on her team, now is the time to prepare for it. I changed out Mach Punch on Son Kung Fu for Terra Blast, and used an Ether to restore power points for Close Combat. Once back up to full health across the board, I brought out Son Kung Fu into the lead, hoping to switch out as little as possible. I managed to get off a Swords Dance while the Stealth Rocks came out. The Fire Terra Blast took down the Capparaja on turn 2, the Bronzong on turn 3, the Corviknight on turn 4, the Magnezone on turn 6 because it had the ability Sturdy, and the Tinkaton on turn 7. For having the most durable team, her whole crew melted against mine. Third up was Larry, who uses Flying-type Pokemon in the Elite Four. I changed out Earthquake and Close Combat for Rock Tomb and Mach Punch, and used an Ether to restore Terra Blast's power points. Larry's first Pokemon is Tropius, who set up the Sun, letting me set up a Swords Dance for 3. Turn 2 was another Swords Dance, then tanking Air Slash like a pro. I did it again on turn 3 and tanked a second Air Slash like a champ. Terra Blast on turn 4 was now at +6, Terra, and Stab boosted, super effective and boosted by the Sun. This thing would have taken down gods, and I used it on a Ficus. After that, I used Rock Tomb on the Altaria, which missed the first time, so I had to heal, and Terra Blast on everything else. Larry didn't stand a chance against me. Hassel, the Dragon Master, was up next, so I grabbed Close Combat and Earthquake, replacing Rock Tomb and Mach Punch. Turn 1, Terrastallize, and use Swords Dance, tanking an Air Slash. Turn 2 was another Swords Dance, this time taking on a Dragon Pulse and reaching the red. I healed on turn 3 and Terra Blasted him on turn 4, not even thinking about the resistances at all. That's on me. Which took out the Noivern. Strategy was now up, but Earthquake took it out in one shot. Same with the Haxorus that came out next. Flapple was taken down by Terra Blast the following turn, followed by Baxcalibur falling to close combat. With that, the Elite Test is finished. Finally, Gita was waiting for us. Sun Kung Fu's moveset was now Swords Dance, Terra Blast, Shadow Claw, and Close Combat. Turn 1, a fired terrestrialized Swords Dance was ready to rock. But thanks to the ability of Gita's Espathra, she copied my boost. Turn 2, the Lady Gaga Ostrich fell down to a Shadow Claw. But now my special defense was lowered. Avalugg came out next, followed by King Gambit, but both fell to 1 Terra Blast each. She then sent out Veluza, but it fell to Shadow Claw. Go-Goat fell to Terra Blast, and her Ace the Gilmora fell to Close Combat due to her Rock Terra type weakness to fighting moves. With that, we have achieved the rank of Champion. Instead of challenging Nemona in Mesagosa right away, I headed up to the Academy in the evening. At the front gates, Clive reveals himself to be Director Clavel, who I knew was him the entire time. I forgot to prepare the correct moves for this fight, so Sun Kung Fu only knew Close Combat, Shadow Claw, Terra Blast, and Swords Dance. Naturally, I had to make do. Against his Oranguru, I activated Fire-type Terra and used Swords Dance. In response, Reflect was set up. I was able to Swords Dance again on the next turn, but Oranguru used Yawn. Next turn, I used Terra Blast and took it out in one hit, but fell asleep the next turn. Houndoom came out next and used Dark Pulse on me while I healed off the sleep status. It deserved the Close Combat that I hit it with. Poltergeist followed and I used Shadow Claw, even though Terra Blast would have been better to use. Amoonguss and Abomasnow both came out, but were one-shot by Terra Blast. And lastly, Quackleval came out and used its Water Terra type to power up. I threw out a Close Combat and one-shot it too, giving me a pretty well-earned victory. Now I had a battle with Penny in the courtyard at the Academy. She started out with Umbreon, so I set up with Swords Dance after getting my attack lowered by Baby Doll Eyes and taking a super effective Psychic. I activated Terra Fire and Swords Dance to reach +5, taking another Psychic. I healed up with a Max Potion, tanked a Dark Pulse, then used Close Combat to take it out. Vaporeon came out next, but thanks to swapping out Shadow Claw for Thunder Punch, I knocked it out in one hit, even after dropping my attack because of Baby Doll Eyes. At this point, Sun Kung Fu wanted to learn Raging Fury. Normally this would be a great idea to learn since it would be amazing for the Elite Four Poppy's team, but I'd already fought her and wouldn't be able to do that again. From there, Flareon fell to Close Combat, while Jolteon, Leafeon, and Sylveon fell to Fire Terra Blast. With that, I headed to Mesagosa, picked up a Draco Meteor TM from Penny on the stairs, and reached Nemona in the Central Plaza, waiting to fight us one last time. Here, my stream disconnected, so we didn't get the chance to see turn 1, but Lycanroc managed to land a critical hit against Sun Kung Fu after a Swords Dance. I used a Max Potion on turn 2, tanking an Accelerock. Turn 3 meant one more Swords Dance, and Lycanroc threw out a Stealth Rock. Close Combat on turn 4 took down Lycanroc. From there, we just Terra Fire and used Terra Blast to take out her Orthworm, Close Combat, the Goodra, and the Dunsparce, and Terra Blast both the Pawmot and the Meowscarada. With that, our final rival battle and final storyline arc are both complete. Now that the 3 main stories are completed, we headed up to Area 0 at the Zero Gate to begin the way home. We glide into Area 0, take cautionary pathways to the research stations, and battle 3 separate Pokemon along the way. The first Gilmora goes down to Earthquake.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Lycanroc.
He survived!
Iron Bundle drops thanks to Close Combat, and the Iron Treads goes down to Close Combat as well. Upon reaching the lab in Area 0, we have 3 fights back to back. Iron Treads falls to a single Close Combat, but Iron Hands tanks an Earthquake to the face, to my surprise, then tanks a Psychic from Penny's Umbreon, also to my surprise, absorbs the recoil from Wild Charge, then finally falls to Close Combat. Fight 3 is an Iron Jugulus, which tanks my Close Combat and retaliates with Hyper Voice. Arvid's Mabostiff misses its Play Rough, so I have to finish it off with another Close Combat. Now that we are inside the lab, the toughest fight is ahead of us. Not only is it all Paradox Pokemon from the future, but I lost round 1 because I got greedy and doubled up on Sword Stance instead of taking down the Iron Moth quickly. I learned my lesson for round 2, only using Sword Stance once, and then using Earthquake to take out the Iron Moth. From there, I just needed to Earthquake the Iron Thorns, Close Combat the Iron Bundle, Terra Blast the Iron Jugulus, tank a Fake Out from the Iron Hands and retaliate with Earthquake, then Terra Blast the Iron Valiant with a critical hit to close out the run. I had a lot of fun doing this. This was creative in running through the region using the TMs that I picked up and the items that I obtained along the way. However, I should mention that several TMs were not necessary, even though I had learned these moves by the end. In total, I used the TMs for Bulk Up, Earthquake, Grass Knot, Heat Wave, Poison Jab, Reversal, Rock Tomb, Shadow Claw, Sword Stance, Terra Blast, Thief, Thunder Punch, U-Turn, and Zen Headbutt. Of those moves, I never even used Heat Wave, Thief, or U-Turn. And even in the case of Shadow Claw, you could have used Terra Blast for the Psychic Gym and Director Clavel fights due to a higher output of damage. I think in the next challenge, should I try another run of another game, I will likely need to do a little more research on what I need to get and how I need to get it. Thank you all for sticking around this long, and a big thanks to those of you who joined us on the live stream and watched the VODs on my channel. You can find the links to my other channels down below, along with the playlist of the challenge run. I'd like to give a big thank you to Michael from M&J TV for the idea behind this video, as well as the challenge as a whole. Additionally, thank you to DougDoug for allowing me to use the footage during the intro, and Tom Fawkes for letting me use his clip from Medali. The original videos used, along with their channels, are all linked in the description below. As for me, I'm finally back from family vacation for the holidays, and work has slowed a bit from the hectic phase we were in, so I plan on setting aside time to play some more games on the stream, be they new or old. If you'd like to see what else I have done, I did do the first 2 chapters of Transformers War for Cybertron as sort of a breath between parts of the run. Once again, thank you all for watching, and remember, try something new. You never know what you'll end up liking until you try it out.